Let's talk about a few data error handling routines. We'll also take a look at how we can suppress some errors as well. Well, we can see here we have a couple of errors. Not a big deal because I sort of planned them, so it's not going to affect anything. We have an error number, unknown database. This is not a DB. And we also have no database selected. These are two errors that pop up there in red, and it looks a little bit better. It's not giving away the farm like the other example. And what we can do is we can look at doesn't matter if we look at retrieving data. We'll look at retrieving data just to show you some things here. Since this is using user 1 here in testing, we can just make a change there and see what kind of error we get when we retrieve data. Well, here you can see we get a warning, access denied for user 1A at localhost, etc., etc. Now, this is not necessarily so good to have people taking a peek at this information when you get a problem with the information that you're retrieving. If you have the wrong password, for example, or it changed for some reason, maybe you restored from a backup, and it can happen. So you have a warning, and it continues to go. It's not going to let you do something else. It tells you the line, and it's not so good. So what you can do is you can use the @ sign. First of all, to suppress an error. And what that does is it suppresses that warning there, but you still get the could not connect type of error. And this is because we have the echo out here for this die here. It's going to die and it's going to echo that to the screen, print that to the screen, and it also prints out the error message. So if we remove that and put something more generic there, saying that you can't connect, there's a problem, put a special error code that only you understand, something like that, or send you an email, things like that. That way you don't have to worry about having your users see the warnings. And this, like I said, suppresses the warnings. And you can add that where you need to. It's going to suppress warnings for anything, really, not just MySQL Connect, any function. It will work that way. So you can have that go through the entire way that you work here. And like I mentioned, or die isn't necessarily the best way to actually have your errors handled. You might want to go to another page, look at the redirection videos coming up later. Maybe you want to have an error message here in the file, another include file. You can also look up the include file video and see how you can do that. And with a lot of different things that we have here in the training here, you can figure out a few ways to actually make this work in a more robust way. And it's also possible just to work with functions and put all your database connection information into a function, and then you can have error handling routines right in functions, again, included in the file. So those errors are handled the same way every time. And that's another way that you can work and have things work for you. But that is really just giving you some details there. Use that @ sign as you need to. Now, we'll go back to the data error handling here. You see that we have some header information that's passed. We'll explain that later. This makes sure that the page is coming from the web server all the time and not from cache. That way you know that the data is going to be refreshed if somebody refreshes it somewhere else. So that's important to keep all of these lines here, or you can look at a different way to do that. There are different ways to actually make sure that the cache is not going to be used, and I use this method of doing it. I've used it for a long time, so there might be more up-to-date ways of doing it, but it is effective, and it works for HTTP 1.1 and 1.0, and I do explain it later. In this example, we're going to include a file, session init.php, and that's backup one path from working with databases. It's at the root level, include, and then you can see it here. So you can double click to open that up, and then I just initialize information here, the logon, the password, the database, and the server, and then you can just use it from session variables. So you want to take a look at the session state section to get more details on how to work with that, and also the include section. Here I'm introducing the include and the require. They're both the same thing, include or require. To include a file, you use the require keyword, and then you put the path or how you would navigate to that path. ... is going to go up a path, go up a directory, and then you can then specify the directory where it's going to be. There are other ways to do that, and you can see that in the include videos. Now we're also going to use isSet like we would any variable, but this is with a session variable, to find out if the session is set. And you want to see those session videos for how this works. You always need that session start to use session variables. And the session variable is really just storing variables on the server side, and that each page can access those particular variables so that you can have global variables, real global variables that are global to the session for that particular user's browser. Basically, the time that they spend at your website within a certain timeout, and those variables can be stored, manipulated, added, subtracted as you wish. So that's just a brief overview of that. But when we actually work here, we're going to do a different syntax here. We're using an if statement, and we're going to check the not here. If we didn't connect to a certain database, then we're going to echo MySQL error number and MySQL error. You can also do some sort of encryption, or like I said, create a different number there. That way you know what the error is and your users don't necessarily know what that is. If you use some sort of special code in another database table or something like that, or just in general. And this is a way to actually check, and this is a standard way using if statements to check to see if you have errors. So if this returns false, this is not a database, that's obviously an error. Connect is that connection that we get here from the connection string. And that's how that's going to work. Also use the @ sign like I mentioned. And then we can select from the DB. You can also use an if statement with that as well to select a particular database. Oftentimes your database is going to be there, and this is used differently than you have here. This is going to have this as a part of the error number, but here it's just used the general way, and it could lead to errors there. So that's just checking another database. So you can comment that out as you need to. And then here again with the query, we're going to select from a table, but this is not a table. It's obviously an error. So we're going to see what that message is, and you get the error number with that function and the error printed out. And that's what you get here, the error number and the actual error in a little bit more of a robust way, because it's actually in the middle of the page. It's in red. It looks better, and it's up to you to take a peek at the code here. No big deal. Just in red. You can put it wherever you need to. You can see the class there, and it looks a little bit better. But I wouldn't even have these types of errors echoed out to my users at all. I would say something cryptic that only I understand.